Okay, guys, I'm so excited for today. So, as I promised, we're diving into the brain in a totally different way. So, you hear from me all the time the brain science of success and neurohacking and my neurocoaching model and how you get brain based transformation. Now, we're going to be diving into how do I see myself? How do I perceive myself? And how am I perceived in the world? How do I show up? And as entrepreneurs, this is so important because how we show up in the world is what people are buying, is what people are seeing, is what and sometimes there's a disconnect there. And I know a lot of you, because we're friends, you're checking out all the things and you tend to be a little bit more logical, and so you tend to want the science behind why the woo works. And I am excited to share my journey with you. You guys know my Myers-Briggs. I talk about it all the time. I'm an INTJ and what that means. A lot of you have dived into Myers-Briggs. This is not Myers-Briggs. So today, Sarajane Case is with me, the queen of the Enneagram. And I'm just going to say it. She's dear friends with a dear friend of mine, Tyler McCall. That's how I got to know her. And they share it. You guys share an office together, right?
Yeah, we do.
That's
it's just
so
like
cool.
Across the wall from me.
Oh, blow him a kiss for me. So Enneagram and we kind of did an interesting dance. And I just knew there was a piece of my perception about myself and how I showed up in the world that I didn't fully understand yet. And I knew from good friends that the Enneagram would help me see more clearly, like a good pair of glasses or a good friend does. And we're going to dive into all things Enneagram today. But Sarajane, for those who are like the Ennea, what is this? What the heck? What is this? Is this some mystical thing? Because that's like some of the things I hear out there, right? And oh my gosh, I'm a Christian. Isn't that like voodoo witchcraft and like all this stuff? No, and no. And just straight up, like she's going to probably talk about all the misconceptions, and I had them all, so I'll probably chime in at that moment. But can you break down like what is this Enneagram and why is it important for an entrepreneur to even play in this sandbox?
Yeah. So the Enneagram, it's essentially a map of human psyche and really just an observation of the way people orient and why they orient, drawn up into a map. So there's 9 different types. Each type is driven by a different worldview, a different fear, basic motivations, and then that can exhibit in different behavior patterns or even like self-sabotage kind of behaviors. And why it's important for entrepreneurs is because when we, it's so interesting how often we try to make adjustments or we try to work on the things in our lives. We try to grow our business and, our brain's really creative at keeping us small, keeping us blocked, keeping us safe. And the Enneagram really shows you, here's your very special recipe of how you've decided to play small in the world and how you've decided to really hide who you actually are.
Yeah. I love that so much. So full disclosure, with my tribe, I always am like, here's what I've gone through. Here's what I'm struggling with. And I am always, I'm always growing. I'm always looking at what's going on. And honestly, like what led me to the Enneagram was this weird need. I mean, like, the difference where it's not just a casual want. It felt like this pulling need to be not validated, but like seen by certain people and acknowledged by certain people. And I'm like, this is just really bugging me because I really don't like, in general, don't care. And so, but yet it was this weird, strong need. And I was looking for that affirmation there. And the Enneagram, when I took it originally, had me score like literally the same as a 3 and an 8, and then sometimes a 7. And now I've dove into the work of it. So now I totally know what I am. I'm definitely a 3. So that's probably not a shock based on what I just said, right? And I do have some 8 tendencies, but I'm massively 7 too, very outgoing, but an introvert. So it's interesting. But when I really started reading and diving deep, even though the test kind of sometimes could have put me at an 8, I am every bit a 3. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and this idea of testing and all of what that entails.
Yeah, I love what you said, and I think there's something really special in the fact that like all of the numbers that you had that were high were assertive numbers.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really beautiful thing to like know
Yeah.
about yourself and to hold. But um yeah, so I think with a lot of times people take this test, right? Like they get online, they find a free test, or they take a, $12 test, they get the result, they read the type, it feels a little lackluster. Like they're like, okay, maybe I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
And they kind of give up on the Enneagram at that point.
Mhm.
And that's why I really encourage people to go through, read like all the numbers, read like your top 3 or 4 especially, and really see which one pokes at your soul. Because when you find your number, the what you described, like I want people to know me, I want to feel really deeply validated, not even validated, but like deeply known for
Known.
the
Yeah.
intricacies of why I do what I do and how I think
Yeah.
and operate.
Yeah.
The Enneagram can kind of open our eyes to our own motivations. We don't always, I just thought, I'm a 7. I always thought like, I'm just a positive person. I'm just a
Yeah.
happy person. I
Yeah.
always looking to feel good, and I'm independent. And those are all great things. And reading about the 7, I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm scared. Like I have this like underlying vibration of anxiety that I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just gives us so much more intricacy into our understanding of ourselves even.
Oh, so true. And from a brain-based perspective, the lack of knowledge, when you don't understand what's going on, your brain sees it as a threat, right? So your brain goes back into safe and familiar, and your brain goes back into playing small. And the more you know about yourself, the good and the bad, I don't even call it bad, the good and the not so good, and knowing that we're human beings having a human experience in a human world where entrepreneurship, we are like differently wired in general. And now we're going through and trying to do it blind. And that's why I feel like the Enneagram allows you to really see more clearly and watch out for those things that can potentially be the speed bumps that brings you back to a place you don't want to be.
Yeah, I think with entrepreneurs especially, I see this tendency to really go all in on discipline,
Yeah.
and to think that if I can just like be
Like,
disciplined enough, if I can just be structured enough, if I weren't such a blank, I would be disciplined enough to do the things I want to do.
yeah.
And insert whatever way that you decide to abandon yourself in that blank space, like however you decide to insult yourself in the moment, which is probably different by type. And but with that, what I really want people to do instead is really think about curiosity. And I think the Enneagram invites us into a space of curiosity. It's like, here are some things to consider. Here's some questions to ask yourself. Why are you showing up the way you're doing? What's causing you to want to shrink?
Mm. Oh, I love that so much. Oh, okay. So you probably get asked this a lot, but I think no better human being on the planet to have you kind of like go through the types just in general. And as you're listening to Sarajane do this, I love the way you said that, because that's exactly what I felt when I like knew that I knew that I knew that I was a 3, that it
Uh-huh.
was like this soul punch. It was like this, like, and also at the same time, it was like a homecoming. It's like, oh, that's
Mhm.
me. And
Mm.
we abandon pieces of ourselves to be loved and feel worthy and feel like we're enough. And the realization was, and I've had great conversations because Pat Flynn's an Enneagram 3 too. And so we've had these conversations back and forth. I was like, yeah, you got to watch that, because you just do things differently. But it was just like this, like that is who I am. And it's beautiful and it's messy,
Mhm.
and it allows you to then decide to be disciplined or be aware of the things that are going to trip you up, and just lean fully into the things that you are. So
Yeah.
like, just listen to Sarajane, and like when like, oh my gosh, she just like got in my head or read my mail, like I just want you to write that down. So would you mind just kind of going through each of the numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start in the anger triad, which is kind of our body based types. So that's 8, 9, and 1. So type 8 is the challenger. They are, they're driven by not being controlled by other people. They kind of walk into a room with an air of authority. They fear being controlled, and their worldview is like they're constantly looking for good leadership. And if they can't find the good leadership, then they're going to step into that role.
Yeah.
And then we have type 9s, which are the peacemaker. They orient in the world with this desire to maintain their peace of mind. They are looking for making sure to maintain connections. They don't want to sever connections with the people in their lives. And so that can lead them to kind of mellow out their personality and their preferences as a way to not lose those connections. And then we have type 1, which is the perfectionist. And type 1 is they're focused on being good. Their fear is of being corrupt or evil. They really focus on how can I be a good person in the world? And this is the right way of a wrong way, the very black and white thinking, which can cause a really harsh inner critic,
Yeah.
which can make them really hard on themselves. And therefore that can kind of bleed out and make them a little bit judgmental or hard on other people. And then we'll move into our heart types, which are the 2, 3, and 4. These types deal the most with like shame or depression. The 2s are the helper. They are the type who they are constantly on the lookout for how to be of service and how to love. They believe that they're not worthy unless they're loved or liked. So they're seeking, how do I earn that? They don't feel like it's inherent, that they have to earn it through service.
Yeah.
And our type 3s are the achiever.
That's me.
Type 3s they're driven by this desire to keep moving upward and forward. Their fears of being worthless or not worthwhile. And they feel like in order to guarantee that they are not worthless, they must continue to achieve new things. So there's a little bit of lack of rest in that. And 3s can really lose themselves in the pursuit of greatness. They can really determine what the greatness is in their surroundings. So in this scenario, this is what achievement looks like. And over here, this is what achievement looks like. And sometimes that's not always what they want or need.
Right.
And then we have type 4, which is the individualist or the romantic. Type 4s are driven by the desire to create or really find their identity. Sometimes they feel this, like everyone has something that they themselves are missing, like an innate missing of a piece that they need in order to be who they're going to be in the world. And so they kind of look outside of themselves to fill that hole. And then we have our head types, which are 5, 6, and 7. These types kind of deal most with anxiety, maybe have like an underlying stream of anxiety. So type 5s are the investigator. They're driven by understanding and knowing. So they do a lot of research. They want to know things from the inside out. They want to know the history. They want to know why. They want to look at it from all angles. They often are the person who's going to become an expert in their field because they're going to go so deep into knowing one topic usually. They also are big on managing their energy. They feel really afraid of having their space infiltrated or being kind of imposed upon, and they really can moderate what they give. Not necessarily emotional, maybe emotionally they might moderate that. They might moderate their finances, things like that. Okay. And we have type 6, which is the loyalist. Type 6 is motivated by safety and security. They really seek certainty. They're on the lookout for where are my answers? Where's my certainty? And that can cause them to really try to see into the future and see the worst case scenarios and prevent those from happening, kind of living in a constant state of, well, if this happens, then this could happen. They can also be a little bit contrarian, have a little bit of a complicated relationship to authority. They'll test authority when a new authority arrives, but then once they've really tested that authority well, they'll become so loyal that they can almost lose their own self permission, their own self identity. Wow. And then we have type 7, our final type, and they're the enthusiasts. That's what I am. Yes. And, type 7s are motivated by like being satisfied by life, not being restricted or tied down, by finding the happiness. And what that can mean is that they're constantly running from pain or negative emotions. They're really afraid of being trapped in pain, emotional pain specifically. And so that can lead them to fill their time up, to constantly try to reframe things into a positive, almost unconsciously staying high and happy and looking toward the future for what's possible, really trying to remain optimistic, which can sacrifice some of those deeper levels of connection. Yeah. So those are our types.
Wow, you do that so well. And in the intro, we talked about how you even got into this and that whole fun story of like the accidental place you ended up here, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to dive into what I know my tribe. I just know them. They're going to be like, yeah, well, you can't put me in a box. Like I'm the special unicorn that has the rainbows. And I want to say that because I felt the same way. And this whole idea of, so I just want to dive in with you. Like if somebody starts looking at this work, then they're going to hear about the wings and the this and the that. And they're going to feel like I did, where it's like, well, I see myself in this, and I see myself in this, and I see myself in this. And I really did resist, like, oh, you can't, like, I'm a little bit of all that. And so I'm an A378 or three. Yeah. Like that's what I would say for a while, but now I've been in the work for a while. So now I'm like, oh, okay. Now I get it. So what do you recommend for somebody who's going to go out there and they're going to look through the literature and they're going to start maybe playing around with finding out who they are in this Enneagram?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing to say is, and especially with, a brain-based model. So there's this amazing man, Dr. Jerome Lib, who he does the Enneagram from a brain-based perspective. And what he talks about is like, our brains do not let us be one thing, right? Like we are all things. And so from the way he teaches the Enneagram is we are all 9 types. You just lead with one.
Yeah, I love that.
And so I think that gives so much freedom to that, like, I need to find the right type. It allows us to explore, like, what part of me is a 3, what part of me is a 7, what part of me is an 8. The importance of really committing to, like, this is the one I lead with is because it really allows us to be honest with ourselves about, like, what we have to work on. Because it can be really tempting and easy to say, well, I'm all the good parts of all the 9.
Stuff. None of the bad of any of it. Pretend
Yeah.
like it's not there.
Yeah, or if you're 4, my loves, you're probably going to be like, I'm all the bad of all 9 types.
Yes, right. Totally.
And
Oh my
really
God.
holding this is the one that I'm going to work on. This is the one I'm going to commit to.
So what Sarah just said, so important, because in the work that we do here on the podcast and in the neurocoaching certification, we understand, and you've heard me like bang this drum for like ever, and my tribe's like, yes, I know, 100% responsibility. But in reality, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you really want to grow your business, you're not dabbling, you're not just side businessing, you're like, no, I am going all in and I want my business to grow, I want to create that, then the work is here. It's not in the webinar strategy or the funnel, because they all work. Like Amy Porterfield slays webinars, has a multiple 8-figure business, and it's the same webinar process that you're saying doesn't work and is broken. It's not outside of yourself. And so taking that 100% responsibility for both sides of you, like every human has all the dynamics, and pretending the Instagram life of I only have the positive sides is actually the thing that's keeping your business from growing. And so that's what I love about the Enneagram is it in a very kind, grandmotherly kind of way says, sweetie, come here, we got to chat. There's this thing and it's not serving you so well.
I agree so much with what you just said. And I think that is the work of the Enneagram, is getting super honest with ourselves about like what we're bringing to the table, and being okay with the fact that, yes, okay, let's say there are 9 types, where there's so many variations of those 9 types. Let's say, within all of those variations, every single one of us has a shadow. Every single one of us has something that we're not showing up in, something that's not working for us and others, something that's not working for our business. It's normal. It's fine. It's the like putting it in the closet and pretending like it's a scary monster that we can't look at that's causing all the problems. Like the loud growling that we hear from the closet that's distracting us from just getting to work. And if we can really just look at the monster in the face, it's actually not that scary. It's just a monster. It's just a silly monster.
Yeah. And here's the greatest thing. We talk about this a lot here is you didn't necessarily create that, and it's not your fault. That's something that, environment or just decisions from people, maybe not even yourself, created this just story. That's the monsters created in the story, the beliefs that you hold about yourself that get hardwired into your subconscious and run 80 to 90% of your day. This allows you, one of my biggest objection is, Dr. Shannon, I can't get at my limiting beliefs. I can't hear the story. Well, you'll hear the story when you dive into the Enneagram. And it's just this beautiful, I love that you say curiosity, because if you can come at it with this uber curiosity about becoming fully you and knowing without judgment, that's the hard part, without judgment that the thing that's standing in your way doesn't need to, but you've got to be aware and then make the conscious decision. Do I want to keep that part of me, or do I want to bring that out into the light and maybe up level it a bit?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I think that, the Enneagram gives us that, like, this is the story that you tell yourself and you learned to tell yourself about who you need to be in order to be okay. Like type ones need to be perfect. Like
Yeah.
that is so much pressure. Type threes, you guys need to be successful. Like,
Mhm.
what happens when you have a bad day?
Oh my.
If you don't know, like, this is the story I tell myself, there's so much self-abandonment that can happen on the other side of that. And I
Yeah.
think in entrepreneur world, we're watching people from this like very sliver lens of what they're doing online. We show the finished product, which whatever, that's fine. We show the finished product, but we don't see all the stories that they had to unravel, all of the obstacles that they had
Yeah.
to ignore and overcome in order to just put that one story out. And we assume everyone else had it easier, and that for some reason when we can't do it, it's because we're just innately flawed,
Mm.
not we have a story. We have this like simple little story we tell ourselves that we just need to kind of do a little bit of work with.
And I just want to be transparent here. Like, so the wing side of things,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 is definitely mine.
Yeah.
So think about that, like driven massively to succeed and serve.
Yeah.
And so there's this big, and it is my goal is to help 1 million entrepreneurs train their brain to transform their business, and 1,000 neuro coaches get certified. I live it, I breathe it, I see it in front of me. It drives me. And I have somebody that I have given permission to speak into my life, my coach, who just messaged me yesterday, and I played it for my husband last night, she said, breathe, put space in the success. You're driving so hard again. What is motivating the drive? Like, allow yourself to settle into, I am going to have this many new neuro coaches in the group and stand in the gap for them. And that's it. Because we start to feel like I've got to do this and I've got to do this. And it's that success thing, because I want all of that right now because I got to serve. And so it's this awareness that I have, and how that will end up physically manifesting for me is that I'll just finally just crash. Like my adrenals will crash. I have nothing left to give. And so the very thing I want to do, I can't do anymore. So I get to be uber aware of that pattern and put space in my calendar. And I just texted my director of operations and I said, this, and this are going on next month. Like, and knowing and giving people around you permission to speak into that. My director has permission to say no to me. And that's not a permission I give a lot with my 8 tendencies. So, but I do. And my business coach too, I'm like, please speak into that blind spot, because it will keep me from the very thing that I want the most in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually think of threes energy as a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like threes go up to the high peak and then they kind of crash. But unless you're really aware, like, this is what my energy is going to do,
Yeah.
then threes will really abandon themselves in that crash place because you can't succeed from there. But it is like this like wave, this ride.
Yeah. So what are the things like, okay, I know like everybody's like on their Google right now, Enneagram, Sarajane Case, like what the heck? I know, do you have a test? Like what's the testing? What do you recommend? How do they get started in that realm?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the most accurate test is on integrative9.com. It's the IEQ9. It's a little bit pricey, but is the most accurate. It's 95% accurate. Most tests online are like 70 to 80% accurate.
Yeah.
So you can do that, or you can take a free test online, which is like enneagraminstitute.com, and just from there, I highly encourage you to really research the top numbers that you get, even like the top 5 numbers, because
Yeah.
your top 3 could be completely inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're socially conditioned to answer questions in a
Yes.
specific way. Like,
Yes.
yes, I love to help people. and, but it's like, do
I
we
never
really?
feel that way when you do all the time. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like, no, I'm not putting my own happiness above the happiness of everyone else. Never.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so take the test and then do some research. The website has great information. If you get to the point where you're like, I'm either a type 3, 7, or 8, if you get to that point and you're trying to decide, I have a workshop on Instagram. Go to Enneagram and Coffee, and there's a link in my bio that'll take you to a workshop that will walk you through every single thing you would possibly need to think about to determine between 2 or 3 types.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the workshop. I've been there, and all those links will be in the show notes, by the way, so you don't have to be feverishly writing. And I love this. It is an investigation. It is,
Mm.
I've seen other people that teach Enneagram, and it's like, no, this is your number. This is your, like, they're so dogmatic about it. And you shouldn't be that way, even with the Myers-Briggs. Like,
Oh.
it is a tendency, it is a pattern. But the reality is, if you're listening to us, you gotta my listeners know I always make them choose this day what you're going to serve. Like, you're either going to serve the illusion of yourself, or you're going to serve the truth of yourself. And it's in the truth of yourself that you really get to show up and serve, and actually help people out and grow your business in that process, or your life, or your health, or your wellness, or your mental health, all of that. And it's in the knowing, and the true knowing, not in the pretending knowing that there's so much happening with right now. So I love your process of investigation, and that we get to, it's almost like a gift in a way. Like, you start unraveling and you're like, oh, and then you sit with it for a bit. And she really does kind of hold your hand through that process. And full disclosure, I messaged her like when I was in that 387 quadrant. I'm like, I needed some one-on-one. Like, I can't figure it out, because that's my nature. It's like, figure it out, need the best person, help me out now, kind of thing. But the workshop definitely does that. And it's fun. Like, tell me some of the fun discoveries you've had as you've been through this journey.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I love the word journey for what this is too. And I think it's, a journey, it's a relationship. It's this process that we're entering into that doesn't stop. There's no
Yeah.
destination to this work. Like, it's
Yeah.
this dynamic where I'm saying, I'm going to commit, I'm going to show up to myself every single day. So I think that that's really important that you kind of touch base on that. The fun side of it for me is really I love business. I love being in business. I love working. It's just a joy for me.
Yeah, me too.
So what the Enneagrams really helped me to do is to just become a little bit predictable, like see my predictable patterns, which for me as a 7 is creating infinite income sources.
Yes.
Just pretending like they don't need tending to after I
All
make
the paths. All the paths.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just do everything that I think is fun.
Yeah.
And and so it's almost become like this funny inside joke with myself where I every single quarter write down what are all of your income streams and then why are they here. And
That's
sometimes
good.
I get to that and I'm like, what have I done? Look what, I've just added things and kept going. And it's kind of funny at this point to just be like, oh, there you go. Oh, there you are again.
Oh,
And
hi there.
yeah. And then like, okay, well, let's cut some things away. Let's commit to some things much more intensely and really allow myself to play with that energy
Yeah.
versus what I used to do, which was just kind of which for 7 would be more like the bailout. So as soon as you feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore, you just kind of bail out. You
I'm
don't
out.
realize how limiting that can be in
Yeah.
terms of your potential of growth for your projects.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right. Because we keep it real here, I hope you're willing to go here, because
Yeah.
I want to talk about the dark sides. I want to talk about those sides, because I think this is the stuff that we don't talk about in our Instagram life. And as much as you kind of laid out the types by kind of their hierarching pull, what are some of the things about each type that aren't the pretty things that we're putting on Instagram that
Yeah.
also are soul punches where we know,
Yeah.
but we don't want to say.
And I can tell you, if you're figuring out your type, when you hear me say this, yours, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's like it's a loving pain. I'm giving from a place of love, because I know you're much more than these behavior patterns.
Yeah.
So I'll just start from 1 to 9. So
Okay.
for our ones, that low level behavior is that perfectionism. I've heard a one say, and I think it's the most beautifully articulated, that they thought the voice in their head was like the voice of God. Like, this is right, this is wrong, and that everyone else is just ignoring it. And so what that can look like is assuming, if they're not doing things the way that you would do them, that they're doing them the wrong way,
Right.
and that they're actually bad. And
Mhm.
so that can look like self-criticism, that can look like the criticism of others.
Yeah.
For our type 2s, our type 2s, y'all, like, want to love, but there's also this, it's not without strings. There's this giving, this beautiful, warm, loving giving, but there's an expectation attached to that that isn't usually spoken or said. And when that expectation isn't met, there's a lot of resentment that gets built up. Until sometimes twos just freak out because it's like, I've been giving and giving and giving, and no one's said thank you. No one's done whatever the thing is that I think they should do to show me that they appreciate it. The other thing that our twos can do is they can really look for the affirmation outside of themselves and not know how to really give themselves the credit that they deserve, for being lovable. Our threes can get kind of into this mode of, I've got the car, I got the house, I built the business, I did all the things, I have my elevator pitch, I know how to just push it out there, I know exactly what I do, why I do it. And then at the end of the day, they're still unhappy. And it's because they've followed this path to success. They've ridden this like escalator up to the top, but they haven't really asked of themselves if they're on the right one, if they're actually working toward what they need and want, or if this even just feels good to them, because they're not thinking, does this feel nice? They're thinking, what can I do to achieve? What can I do that's successful? The thing for our fours is that fours can really hold on to all the negative and release the positive. In the moment, fours are really present with the positive. Like, they can really delight in like the simplicity of a butterfly, or like this beautiful moment. They can really hold on to that. But if I say to a four, like, you're so smart, there's a high chance that they'll never remember that that was said, because they really release a lot of the positive things and hold on to a lot of the shaming language, the harmful things that get said to them, and attach that to their identity. And they have to do a lot of reworking to really believe in their own innate goodness. We have our type 5s. The low end of our type 5s is that they can be completely out of their body. So they live in their minds. So this can look like really closing people out, not sharing their emotions, not being vulnerable, and kind of flaking on things because they just don't see the things of the world as important as the things of the mind. It can be as silly as like bumping into stuff because they're so in their heads and not in their bodies. Type 6s can get into this like anxiety pattern where they're really just constantly afraid, constantly antagonizing, not intentionally antagonizing, but just trying to present all of like, they're seeking certainty ultimately, but just like pushing, playing devil's advocate, really seeking, really testing people. And that can lead them to just feeling the negativity in their body. It can lead to not making any decisions, really going back and forth, being a little bit too loyal to people who don't deserve their loyalty, or who maybe use their loyalty for harm, and things along those lines. Our type 7s, the type 7s, man, I'm going to be really hard on the 7s because it's me, and so I'm a little bit harsher.
Right.
But we really can hurt people with kind of abandoning them, because when things stop feeling good to the 7, they're out. If you're not conscious of your pattern, you sever a lot of relationships. You might sever a lot of business deals. You just kind of start off strong. And I will say that sevens they say yes a lot. And they don't always mean yes forever. They just mean yes in this
yes
moment.
right now.
It's a yes. And so you have to be really conscious to not say yes to everything that feels good in that moment, and make sure it's something that you're going to feel good about 2, 3, 4 months, years down the road.
Yeah.
And not be so frivolous with your commitments, because when you're frivolous with your commitments, you can't follow through with all of them. And then we have our type 8s, which 8s can be really similar in the way that ones are like, there's a right way and a wrong way. The 8s approach is it's like a bull in a china shop, like just, here's what I think, and you're wrong. If you don't, once they're a little bit more tactful, they're a little bit more proper. 8s are just like very direct, very honest. And what can happen for our 8s is that honesty isn't always welcome or invited or met. If someone is tender or isn't fully self-loving, that honesty can really do damage and really do harm. Then we have our type 9s, and the low end of our type 9s is that they tend to whitewash themselves. They will soften all of their opinions, soften all their thoughts, because they want everyone to feel comfortable and welcome and invited in. And therefore they kind of disappear. And the childhood message of the 9 is that it's better for everybody if you're just invisible. And 9s can kind of do that, where they sink into the walls and they don't speak up. They don't interject, they don't share an opinion unless they feel like it's absolutely necessary. And what can happen is you have a lot of people who like you, but it's because all of those people really benefit from you not existing fully in your life. And what you need and what we need as people who want to love you and people who want to do work with you is that you fully show up as you are. So those are all our numbers.
Wow. Thank you for doing that. I just wanted everybody to get like the full picture. And I know you're probably sitting here listening and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, but you're not, actually, you hadn't actually heard it that way before. So thank you for doing that. And I want, on our last question here, just to ask you, we know where to go, where to get started. We know what to do. We heard a little bit that's got our interest peaked, and we're like, tell me a little bit about what the practice looks like for you today. Like once you settle in and you're like, okay, I know my tendencies. I know, like, enlighten us on how you use this to help yourself become the best version of yourself and also help you in your business.
I think it goes back to that curiosity piece of, with the Enneagram, I'm able to ask myself the right questions. So let's say I'm really stressed out, I'm really overwhelmed in my life. Let's example. I can say, okay, what 7 tendencies could have gotten you here? What are you afraid of feeling? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of being still and quiet right now? Do you feel like your freedom is being restricted? I have the language to really communicate with myself with curiosity and in order to get the answers, because what used to do is just say like, well, why can't I just feel better?
Judgment, right?
Why can't I just do this? And instead I can say, oh, you have some feelings that you're not acknowledging, you're not being honest about. And if you could just sit still for like 5 seconds and just feel them, you'll probably be fine. You'll be okay. But it's that access point. That's why I say it's a relationship, because it is a participatory thing where every day I'm like, how's my 7 showing up today? And am I using the high end of that 7, or some of these low end tendencies come in? And I'll be honest, like most of us are doing both every day.
Yeah.
Like most of us are living in the high and low end of our number every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you create this invitation to the journey. In my tribe, we talk a lot about the fact that it's the thoughts that create the emotions that create the beliefs. And it's out of that place that this gets programmed into your subconscious. And this is where these patterns show up, because they're in your subconscious. You're not thinking about it. You're not consciously choosing it anymore. It just is. And so as we walk through in our programs how to remove those patterns that you don't like anymore, it just dovetails so gorgeously with this journey, the sojourn that we're on in this life and then this unfolding. It's really a self-reflective tool like no other, I think, that's out available on the market, where you can finally stop judging yourself for the things that you don't like, and you can just see them through this lens of like, oh, that's just, every coin has two sides, and just create this beautiful awareness and filter to be able to look at everything through. So thank you for bringing this to the surface. I've been dying for this podcast interview. I love Sarajane to pieces. She's so good at what she does. And I know my tribe's obsessed with you now, like for life. So where can they connect with all things Sarajane? What can they get their hands on for you? Just give us all the details and we'll put all the links in.
Yeah, so I would love to hang out with all of you at Enneagram and Coffee on Instagram. I also have a podcast called Enneagram and Coffee, and I have a book coming out. It's in pre-order now.
Good. Oh, good. Can we put the pre-order link in the show notes?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
And it's on pre-order. You can buy it anywhere that books are sold online. So it's called The Honest Enneagram by Sarajane Case. And it goes through kind of what from the Enneagram from a place of self-compassion, but also with a bit of action in there. So what are some tips and tools that you can put in your tool belt to take a little bit of action on the way you think and work in the world?
I love it. Okay, so all those links will be, and then congratulations on the book. I'm so excited for you. So cool. So cool. I've been dying for her to do this. I'm like, write a book, girl. Like, write a book, because it's a voice that's needed in the marketplace for sure. I want to wrap with just having you leave us with your favorite, like if you can leave them with one thought on the Enneagram specifically, what would that be?
Yeah. I think it's so important that when you start this journey, I really encourage you to start first from a place of what's good. What's good about my type. Create a safe place for you to land in all of this work, so that when you dive into that darkness, which I don't think you should be scared of at all. Mm-hmm. When you dive into that, you have a safety net of like, okay, but here's all this good, and you don't lose yourself. You don't give up on yourself in this journey, because you're so worth the relationship that you can have to yourself. And and if you can create that safety net, it's so worth it.
I love it. Beautifully said. Thank you, Sarajane, so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. Such an amazing podcast. Okay. Check out the show notes. Go check out the pre-order for her book. It's simply amazing. Love. And I want you to let me know if you're diving. First of all, if you've already done the Enneagram and you know like where you are, who you are, the numbers and how they land, tag me on Instagram. Let me know. I want to hear, like, where are my threes? What are you? Like, we have so much in common all the way across the board. And plus that helps me know, like, you're really doing the stuff. Like, not only are you brain training, but you're also really getting uber curious on how to just really deepen your relationship, your love, and your knowledge of yourself. So on that note, that is it for the Epic Success Podcast for this week. I will see you next week back here again. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, I sure would love it if you did. And for all us podcasters, if you leave a 5-star review, it feels like a big warm hug, and I would appreciate it a lot. We always feature those reviews on our Instagram and we tag you. All right, that's it for this week. See you next week. Bye.